Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. One of the surprises for me over the last couple of years has been the number of watches copying the look of 1950s Patek Philippe's. I'm not really into Pateks personally, and I have no desire to buy one either new or vintage. I also have no budget to buy one either new or vintage, and I suspect the same applies to many people. Hence the number of affordable alternatives that offer the same look but for, well, in this case, $65 US. Now, I looked at the Furlan Mari last year, a watch that won prizes for its design, despite the fact that the design is entirely borrowed. Admittedly, though, you had to pay to enter the competition to win the prize. But they were $350 at launch. Now they have cranked all the way up to $650 US if you're buying one direct from their website. San Martin do a version for around $200 US. But today I'm going to review a Pagani Philippe. Yours for 10% of the price of the Furlan Mari and around 0.0001% of the price of a vintage Patek. Approximately. Now, I bought this one during the March sale earlier this year, but I finally got around to shooting some B-roll with it last week. Make sure you stick around for the close-ups. It looks awesome from arm's length, but the tight budget becomes apparent under macro lens. Let's put it that way. Let's flip the camera and get on with it. Alright, let's try and do this relatively quickly today, famous last words. Let's start with some of the best bits of macro footage of this watch that I was able to shoot. What do you think? Does this look like a $65 watch? It's pretty amazing what you can buy these days for not a lot of coin. Applied indices, domed sapphire crystal, a Seiko movement, and a surprisingly nice mesh strap. If you just want to scratch the vintage Patek itch for as little money as possible, this is as little money as is possible. Don't expect fancy packaging, do expect a blue polishing cloth. I love these little blue polishing cloths. My house has been full of them at times, and they're still my go-to when I'm filming a watch to keep things clean. I think you can upgrade the box to a nicer one, but really, it's just going in a cupboard, so why would you bother? They chuck in a free NATO strap, but again, I wouldn't bother with that one myself. How good do you think the free NATO strap is going to be with a $65 watch? Yeah, exactly. The watch is a wee sweetie though. It's actually a little larger than seems to be standard for this style of retro Patek alike. So 39mm in diameter, 13.1mm thick, so a little bit chunky. Lug to lug though, a super wearable 45mm on the nose. 20mm between the lugs, and on the supplied mesh band it weighs 105 grams. I must say, 200 meters of water resistance is a little bit surprising and a little bit unnecessary, to be honest, but I guess it means you can get it wet, no worries if you want to. Crystal is double dome sapphire, and the movement is a Seiko VK64. And there you go, a proper screw-on stainless steel caseback, kind of semi-sterile but with enough information, including the model number, which is PD1739 around the outer edge. Further evidence of 200 meters of claimed water resistance. The crown screws down, by the way, but the pushers don't, so yeah, okay. I wouldn't necessarily be taking this one deep sea diving. The case finish is perfectly pleasant. Again, I remind you of the price. Now, they have tried to disguise the relative chunkiness by only brushing a thin section of the mid case. That's what they want you to see. That's how thick they want you to think the watch is. There's a stepped high polish bezel on top of that mid case and beveled double dome sapphire beyond that. The bezel and the bottom of the case are both high polish. I wish Pagani would stop putting blue plastic on their crowns though. I spent about 10 minutes picking the blue out with a wooden toothpick, and I still haven't managed to get this one as clean as I would like it. Nice touch though is the finishing on each of the pushers, exactly like a 1950s reference 1463 Tasti Tondi Patek, upon which this watch is based. The mesh is surprisingly good. No rough edges, no poorly manufactured links. Double security clasp means it's not going anywhere either once it's on wrist, and it's quick release, so you can swap this one out for a 20mm strap from your collection if you want to. It is available to buy on the leather, but I thought this silver dial really suited the silver mesh, which is why I went for this particular version. Oddly enough, the dial and hands also look a lot like the same reference Patek. Now, because this is a VK64, the watch has a bi-compact twin register layout, nice and symmetrical. It's a 24-hour sub-dial at 3 and a 60-minute chrono timer dial at 9 though. That means this watch does not have a ticking second hand, so it can look a bit dead unless you have the chrono running. But you can't just leave the chrono running and be damned with a battery because it stops after 60 minutes. Talking of the battery, it should last between 2 and 3 years depending on how often you press those chrono pushers, and the accuracy of the VK64 is plus or minus 15 seconds per month. Now the Pagani logo is applied and the brand name and chronograph are just printed on beneath it. Indices are also applied, Romans at the 12 and 6, batons everywhere else, just like the Patek. They are high polished silver, as are the leaf hands, the very long central chronograph hand, and the two small sub-dial hands. There's a printed minute track beyond the indices and a printed tachymeter scale beyond that, which most people, myself included, are never likely to use. Look, I'm going to circle back to the dial a bit later in the video, but from arm's length, it looks great, doesn't it? Talking of which, let's get it on my arm. I've got a 7-inch wrist for your reference. This one both looks and feels a little larger than the Furlan Mari or a Baltic, for example, which adopts a similar mid-century Patek-alike look. But at 39, it's still not a massive watch, and that really short lug-to-lug means even people with small wrists are going to be okay with this one. 13mm though, it's going to be quite chunky, so do bear that in mind. Silver hands against a silver dial, it's never going to be all that spectacular in terms of legibility, especially as the hands are rather small, so they do come and go, as you can see, depending on the angle of the light. You can also see there's no AR coating on that crystal, so there's ever-present flecto as well. Pocket shot to finish. It's a slightly dressy retro watch, especially on this mesh band, so I'm not sure my jeans and purple t-shirt are quite the right fit. Maybe shorts and a polo would be more appropriate. At 100 grams, it's not a heavy watch, and you can take way more off that if you opt for leather. Moans and niggles, and I'll start with a technicality. I reckon the Pagani logo on the clasp is upside down. The clasp is the right way round, but it should be the other way up so that it flows naturally when you roll your wrist. I think they need to invert it, therefore. And again, a bit of context is required here. It's a $65 watch with a Seagull movement, sapphire crystal, a heap of water resistance, even though it's a bit questionable, and a reasonable quality bracelet. If you don't look closely, it's a cracker. But I just got a new toy. I got a new 2x 90mm macro lens, and when you look at the dial through this lens, you can see things you can't see with the naked eye, including some pretty rough finishing around the edges of the sub-dial and colour bleed from the printing around the edges of the sub-dial. You can also see various bits of dust and imperfections, particularly on those high polish indices. This is going to be really interesting from now on, seeing how watches cope with this new lens, particularly the ultra affordable stuff like this. But overall, definitely one of the best Paganis that I've looked at, particularly considering the really low asking price. I also think that people have a quite different attitude to blatant one-for-one copies of 70-year-old watches than they do to blatant one-for-one copies of current catalogue stuff. The success of Furlan Mari is surely evidence of that. And for 10% of the price of a Furlan Mari, this one offers 95% of the look. Just don't look at it too closely. So there you have it. If you have been itching for this look and you don't spend your days viewing watches under a loupe, go for it. I mean, it has the same specifications as a watch costing 10 times as much as it. It is a little rough around the edges, so just don't look at the edges. If you made it all this way, you should check out my review of the Furlan Mari or have a look at my favourite Pagani, the Mission to Mars Speedy Lookalike. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. I'll see you again soon.